Hi, this is Janice Wynn. This is the next installment of my class videos. This is Color Efex Pro. I'm going to start out by showing you in the Color Efex Pro dialog box that we have a filter list where it has filters and recipes. I want to show you this because I'm going to refer to it while I'm working through the filter interface and how we get those to actually have filters contained within those lists. First of all, these would allow us to go to a specific filter. So if I wanted to go to Dynamic Skin Softener on these particular tabs or this particular recipe, I would just click on it and it would automatically apply that filter. Whereas if I just click on the Color Efex Pro 4 here, it will go to whatever was the last used filter. Let's go ahead and go into Color Efex Pro 4. When you first install, you'll notice that Color Efex Pro 4 will automatically go to the black and white conversion filter. After that, it will use whatever was the last filter that you happen to have used. So right at the top of the list, we have some buttons. And these buttons will allow us to look at suggested filters. So for instance, if we click on Wedding, it'll show all the wedding ones. Notice these little yellow stars? The little stars are telling us which are our favorites. So I can go click on favorites and it'll just give me my favorites list. This favorites list is also the same list that is going to be on the selective interface. When we scroll down, that we can see beside the stars over on the right hand side, we have some stacks. So if we go into a filter, say we go into Bleach Bypass, we can click on a stack, and the stack will show different suggested settings for that particular filter. So it's like a preview to some settings that you might not have thought about. We can go back. Let's go to something else like cross balance, and then we'll go to the stack, and then the stack can show all the different possible cross balance filters that we have in there, and that would best be some of the filters that are in the stack over here. So those are the different things that you'll find. And so when I suggest you open up both a portrait and a nature image and go through each and every one of these filters and then also look at the stacks, and this will really help you to understand what filters you may use or might not use. There's no exact recipe, but it's really by working with the filters, you'll get used to them and you'll know how to integrate them into your workflow. We can also change what these buttons are. Go down to the lower left-hand corner, go to Settings, and in Settings we have Filter List Settings. And this is where our categories are. That's what these are. These are categories. And we can list that. So for instance, instead of softening, maybe I want portrait as there. I have portrait already here. So let's change that one maybe to softening. So we're just changing the order up. So we'll just go down here to softening. And then we have nature, macro, travel. That's all good. Now when I clicked on it, you notice it didn't change. It'll only change. So let's go ahead and hit cancel. It'll only change when I reopen Color Efex Pro 4. Also notice over here on the selective tool, we added a new favorite, and now instead of just the dynamic skin softening and the darken and the bleach bypass, there's now darken and lighten center. So there's, I believe, up to 10 filters that you can list in there. So it's kind of handy to work with. So let's go back to Color Efex Pro 4 again, and you'll see now that list has changed. Let's go down below all these different filters. We have the scroll bar. This will just scroll to all the different filters. Let's go below that, and we have what are called recipes. Recipes can be a single filter with select adjustments that you like for that particular filter, or they can be a stack of filters, so more than one filter applied to create an effect. So if I come scrolling down here and say I go, oh, I like this color contrast detail stack, I'll click on it. It'll give me a little warning. It'll tell me adding this recipe will replace the filter we already have. So it'll eliminate that filter. Click yes, and now it'll apply that stack of all three of those filters. Also, you'll notice that this has a little star on it, and you can put a little star on any of those that you like. That'll always show up on the selective tool in our recipes. Right below, we have history. History will show us all the different steps that we've already applied to our image. So it'll show what preset or a black and white conversion, whatever we've done, and we can click on that and it'll show, so we can do the compare button or the before and after. You can also slide the state there and say, well, let's look at the color contrast detail and the glowing fade. So now I can slide back and forth and see how I like the difference between the two filters. We also have the ability in here is that if we had used a filter before and we wanted to reapply it, but we couldn't remember what we last did, we can also apply the last filtered state. That'll look at the last filter you applied to the previous image and allow you to apply it. So for instance, on this one, it might be, because we had done that black and white, that would be the black and white one. So let's just go back to that glowing fade. Right at the bottom, we also have our settings, and the settings allow us to set up the interface. I recommend doing this when you first install Color Efex Pro. Select your language, whether we want a single image view or a split view. I prefer a single image view when I'm working on Color Efex Pro. What my background color is, I would suggest using gray, and then what my default zoom state is. I wouldn't do anything over 100%. Down below here, we have enabling the GPU. This is our graphic processing unit. It'll make Color Efex Pro run faster, so please turn that on. After clicking OK, we want to apply the effect to a separate layer. You also have the ability to help improve the collection by offering feedback. You can turn this on or off. And then our filter list that I covered earlier. Over on the right hand side, we have our zoom state. You can click on it and that will automatically zoom. We can navigate. We can have our space bar that will also zoom in and out. You can also zoom out to make it fit the frame by doing a Command or Control 0. Over on the right hand side is the list of filters. So let's go ahead and eliminate these filters that I did. We can just do X's on them. We can remove them. And now there is no filter applied to the image. Let's start out with a little bit of contrast only. Contrast only is a great tool. It allows me to adjust the image in a different, slightly different way than I would in Adobe Camera Raw. Let's go in and I'm just going to turn this down. It always has the contrast only turned way up by default. I'm going to darken this just a little bit. In contrast, that's the same contrast as what's in Photoshop. And it's a nice contrast. If I go too far one way or another way, it'll start clipping. Contrast only preserves what is called photo space. So it isn't going to do the clipping, and it does a much more intuitive adjustment of contrast. Soft contrast also gives you a different type of feeling in the contrast. Look at how the background is changing and how it opens up. So I can apply soft contrast and contrast only and in opposite directions. So I can open up and protect some of the highlights still while adding a nice crispy contrast to the image. We have saturation in here. I'm not going to adjust that here because I can do it in another filter that I would prefer using. We can protect highlights and shadows right here. So we can open up the shadows or we can darken down the highlights. And then right below it we have control points. What's really important in this area below the control points is our opacity slider. We can adjust how strong we want this filter applied to the overall image. We can use the control points to apply these settings to part of the image. So I'll just click A+. You'll notice that now the darkening that I did in the background has gone away. And I can bring that out, and therefore now it's covering and encompassing the whole flower. And we may want to see, because I put this on a fairly light portion of it, may want to see how that control point's working on it. Now notice the control point only has an opacity slider. When we were working in Vivesa and within Silver Effects, we had a whole bunch of sliders. And that's because those sliders were affecting all of those different controls. Whereas in Color Efex Pro, we're applying a filter effect and we're saying we want this effect or we don't want the effect. So it's a yes-no circumstance rather than a making an adjustment. So that's why it's going to look and react differently. I put a plus control point there. I can put a minus control point right over in the background. I can expand that out. And now we can see how the two are interacting. I can put an option key here. Let's see here, let's turn those on. And I can do my option or alt, and then I can drag and duplicate these control points throughout the flower. And I can do the same in the background. Now when I turn all of those on and off, so we can see the mask. So this portion of it is the same as you saw within the other filters. You can delete them by just selecting a control point and hitting the delete key. You can copy and paste with Command or Control C and paste them with a Command or Control V, just like we did with the other programs. Now right below here, you'll notice that we have what's called Add a Filter. That means I can stack filters within it. Instead of coming in and out of Color Efex Pro over and over again, we can now put all those filters in a stack within Color Efex Pro all at one time. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add a Filter. It'll now give me an empty filter slot, and I can go in here and say bring some detail into the image. So I'm going to click Tonal Contrast. It's a little bit harsh, so let's go ahead and change that to something a little more balanced there. Give it a little more highlight detail. And don't want so much in the shadows. There we go. I'll go ahead and let that saturation come up. Well, maybe I don't want the filter in the background. If I don't want the filter in the background and I did the control points in the contrast only, how do I get those same control points over here in tonal contrast? It's very easy. With contrast only closed and tonal contrast open, I can copy the control points in contrast only by this little box here. I can copy those control points, and now I can come back down here to tonal contrast, click on the same box, and now I can paste the control points. So the control points that I have, the exact same ones that I had in contrast only now, are being applied to tonal contrast. Pretty good, huh? It really makes it fast and quick and easy. Let's go ahead and add another filter, but I'm not going to click Add Filter because I want to show you an alternative way to add another filter really quick and easy. Just hold your Shift key, and let's add another filter by doing Brilliance and Warmth, which is a great tool. So we're going to just hold our Shift key and click on Brilliance and Warmth. Brilliance and Warmth is a little bit different than saturation, and that's why I don't use saturation in contrast only. I like to be able to use both perceptual saturation and standard saturation, and the way this filter is working is a little bit different. I can cool the image off, or I can warm it up. So let's warm it up just a little bit. Saturation is going to increase the saturation of those warm tones. Perceptual saturations are going to do the same on more of your cool tones. Again, if you only want to add it the same way we've done the control points on the other two filters, we can go ahead and just paste those control points now right there because we've already copied them, and now we can just go ahead and paste them there. Another thing I wanted to point out is that we have like several filters in here. If we wanted to change the order of the filters, like for instance, maybe we wanted to do the Brilliance and Warmth before the contrast only. So just grab that filter and drag it up and put it above the contrast only. And now it changes how the whole image is interacting. Brilliance and Warmth after. See, it looks much different than if we do it before contrast only. So play with the filters. If it doesn't look quite the way you want it, might change it up. You can also turn on and off different filters within the stack, or you can totally eliminate them. Say we wanted to take this set of stacks and we wanted to create this as a recipe. So we can save it as a recipe. It won't save the control points, but it will save all the other settings. And we'll just say dynamic flower. If I call that dynamic flower, I can come down here And we'll see here we have dynamic flower, and there is our filter set. Now notice that the background here is a little bit darker in this preview. And the reason is it isn't showing the control points because we have not applied any. So we want to add one of these recipes to an image on top of those particular filters. We can do the same thing by going in and selecting it. So this foggy detail with warmth, that looks pretty cool. So I'm just going to hold my shift key just like I did with adding a filter, but now I can add recipe, whatever makes this particular look to what already I've done. So I'll just hold the shift key and it's going to stack it on there. So now that stacked that right on top of the other ones. Now if we didn't want to have those turned on, we can turn those off and then we can see what that filter is doing. We can turn some of these back on, but the preview over here is only going to show that recipe is going to do on the original, not what you've already have filtered. So that's what's going to be a little bit different. That's why this does not look like this. And that the reason is that this is showing from the original, whereas once we apply it, it's applying it with our other filters. So that gives you an idea on how to work with Color Efex Pro. Down below here, we have the loop and histogram. We can click on loop, and that's just showing a magnification at 100% as we're moving around. We have a thumbtack as we do with the other filters, and now it eliminates that moving around, and then come back. And then we also have the histogram. Within the histogram, we can click on the histogram. It'll show you each of the channels and the luminosity, and we can turn on so we can see the clipping on either one. So that's kind of the histogram there. I'm going to just go ahead and click OK and apply that to the image. Now clicking OK is not going to apply a mask. You'll notice the mask is there, but then it disappears because it's putting it on the whole thing. Now let's look at Color Efex Pro on a portrait. I'm going to go ahead and go into Color Efex Pro. And this is how you learn how to use all the different tools within Color Efex Pro. Is you'll look at it with a portrait and with something from nature. Let's go ahead and go into a filter that will soften it. Let's go to Classic Soft Focus. We have two different soft focuses. We have both the soft focus and the diffusion. Diffusion diffuses from black, and soft focus diffuses from white. We'll go into diffusion. I'm going to go ahead and turn that brightness down a little bit, up the strength just a touch, and you can see how pretty that is. But I don't want to darken the face. So you just do a minus control point. Let's look at how that did a nice selection. We're going to use an Option or Alt key, and we'll duplicate it just by clicking and dragging. But we can see that parts of the image are still selected that I really want the soft focus on. So I'm going to go ahead and put a plus on that, and then get all those particular areas. Now, I don't want it to soften the eye, so I'll just go ahead and put a minus on the eye and a minus on the lips. And then we'll just put the plus around there on the different areas. There we go. And that just makes it a lot easier for us to see what's going on with what it's selecting and what it's not selecting. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And we're going to stack a filter on there. I want the greens to have a little more dynamic to them, so I'm going to go ahead and hold down my shift key and go to foliage. So things like this just allows you can see what the image is doing. You can go in and play with some of the filters. I can enhance the foliage, see how much I want to enhance it or not. Let's go ahead and add another filter. See, we have some leaves here that are brown, and they kind of distract. They pull away from her face. So I'd like to make those green. And one of the ways to make those green is to actually paint them green. And painting them green would be to colorize them. So I'm going to hold the Shift key, click on Colorize. Let's select one that is a black and white because we don't want to have any color influence. And we want to sample from the original photo, so I'll just go ahead and let's do a side-by-side comparison, and we'll just click that color. There we go. We want it to be nice and green. Now we can go back to the single view, turn that up a bit. Now see, we can see that nice green coming through. And now we want to do it on the brown ones, but we can't see the brown ones. So let's go ahead and do the split view. And I'll just do a plus control point on the brown leaf. And as soon as I did it on the brown leaf, you'll notice that everything else turned back. And that's what's really nice, because the control point is saying, I want it primarily on brown. I want to make sure there's no influence on her skin tone. So I'll just keep that kind of small. And now we can see the other brown leaves. So I'm going to hold my Option key and just click and drag. And colorize these other leaves. So now that's all pretty in green, and we have the ability, again with our split view, to see, and I see it influencing the dress just ever so much, and we have to see what is in, where the influence in the dress is coming. So we can find that out by go on the single image view and turn off filter. Okay, you can see that the colorized filter is not the one that's influencing it. Let's look at the foliage. See, it's the foliage filter that actually was making that look green. So we'll just go into the foliage filter, hit a little minus, put it right there and there. The foliage filter shouldn't pick up that yellow that's in the hat, but it did. So that's why you want to kind of check it out. Before we go forward, I want to show down here we have OK, Cancel, and Brush. And if I click OK, it's just going to apply all of these filters. If we click OK, it's going to apply the filters exactly how we see them in the interface. But if we click Brush, it's going to create a new layer, and it's going to put a mask on the layer that conceals all. So you're not going to see the actual effect on the image because that is black. It's concealing all. We want to go ahead and click Fill. That'll put it on the whole thing. I want to make sure there's no influence on the skin. This is how we get to reassure ourselves that we don't get that influence. Plus, we can take some of the softening off of portions of the veil. So just click Erase, come in, erase that off, and then I'll just bring back little parts of the veil there. And you can also see what's happening with the mask by hitting backslash. And backslash will show us, see, we missed part of her face. So I can go ahead and go in there. Go, that there, and that there. There we go. What happens is that since we can see the mask with the backslash, we can really refine that. And then click Apply. So that kind of goes over some of the things with Color Efex Pro. I did it on a flower shot and I did it on a portrait. Play with all the different filters. Use the little examples over on the right hand side so you can see what the filters are doing on the image. Color Efex Pro is a really great tool. I'll see you soon in class. Pixera is my official sponsor for this series. Thank you.